I know.
Terry, you're the one that usually does this. Okay, so.
Alright.
Okay.
Good? Okay. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. It is 5:12 p.m. We're convened today as the Provo City School District Board of Education, and we're meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We're going to begin our study session today with a roll call. My name is Rebecca Nielsen, and I am the board president.
Jennifer Partridge, vice president. Melanie Hall, board member.
Terry McCabe, board member.
Lucy Boyce, board member.
Will Widener, student member.
Gina Hales, board member.
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
Devin Daly, director of accounting.
Wendy Dow, superintendent.
Okay, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone who's here with us today, both in person and online. I will entertain now a motion to convene our study session.
I move that we convene study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by board member Partridge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by board member Hales, and now we are officially in our study session. We're gonna start today with a discussion on FTE, and we're gonna give that time to Wendy.
Alright. So I believe that I sent you this link in an email. And I think I need to add Devin on here real quick. But she can look at mine for a minute. So okay, so we have been talking a lot as a cabinet about, and I think also as you as a board have been talking about making sure that we're getting the right resources to our schools. And so we started to look at how we could create a very systemic way in which we deliver FTE to the schools. As of right now, the way that we typically do it is we're almost giving schools a type of budget. So they get some FTE allocated, and then they're getting a budget that's tied to it, and what we're starting to figure out is we're getting these huge discrepancies between how schools are utilizing that money, and we're getting a lot of part-time people that are sitting in schools rather than putting a lot of the resources towards teachers and making sure that we can maybe even make our class sizes a little bit smaller and make sure that we're supporting the needs of our students. So this is, for everyone that's listening, this is a draft, a possibility of some things. We're working with Devin and Steve in our finance department to really look at how many FTE do we have available, what would this look like. Jared and Daryl are going to take this to their principals on Thursday to get feedback, so that we can see kind of what this allocation does. We don't really think that it's gonna significantly change or sway allocations out to schools. It's just gonna make it more systematic, and that we can respond more immediately, especially as the school might be experiencing some greater impacts over time, greater challenges over time. And if I had been really smart, these would have all been alphabetized on the left, but you'll notice they're not, so I didn't quite get that far. I have no idea. There was no method to the madness. It was just kind of how I brought up some different things. But there's 3 different tabs at the bottom, so we'll start with elementary. And I just used 2024 numbers as an example of what this would look like. So we went through, we usually use a ratio of 27.5 students per FTE. So that's how this was calculated, and it rounds. So if it's a 3.45, it's gonna round it down to a 3. There's specific reasoning why we did that and didn't bump it up, because it tends to get solved in other places. So at the elementary level, we break it out by grade level, because you can't have teachers split over multiple grades. You can't have them teach for an hour in first grade and an hour in second grade. You know, that doesn't work, obviously. So it gives us in this column G right here, or Q, sorry, it looked like a G. It gives us our FTE allotment that's just based on the enrollment. This does not include special education students. This does not include any additional funding. This doesn't include class size reduction. It doesn't include BTS grants, Beverly Taylor Sorensen grant, nothing like that. Then what we did
What number are you using to get the 23? Like how many students per?
27.5. And so you'll see that in these formulas here. Like if you click on this, it notices that it rounds and it goes the total number divided by 27.5. So you'll see that all the way across. when we, then the state has, our MTSS group identified, we have a ton of different things that really create a school that create challenges for schools. And so we agreed upon, some that we feel like have, a greater impact on schools than others. So first is when the state defines a school as being highly impacted, and we only have 4 of those. So that's Spring Creek, Franklin, Timpanogos, and Independence High School. What I automatically did is I gave them an additional 2 FTE just by the sheer fact that they're considered highly impacted. It means that there's just a lot of forces that play in that particular school, and so they're gonna need some more support. Then what we did is we went through and we decided we really wanted to create an impact with teachers that are within their first 3 years, because when you have a high number of teachers in those first 3 years, it's a lot of extra work for principals, it's a lot of extra work for coaches. It can create stress on grade level teams if you don't have experience. So we identified then what percentage of the staff was within their first 3 years. And then I created a formula here, so if you start looking over here, you'll notice that we take the total number of teachers at the school, we multiply it by that percentage, and then I times it by 0.1. Now the reasoning for that 0.1 is I felt like, okay, over the course of having, say, a school has 10 brand new teachers, they should get an additional FTE as a result of that. So for every 10 teachers that are within those first 3 years, there should be an additional FTE that is awarded to that school. We could make that a higher number if we wanted to, but I also have a limited pot of FTE to pull from. So, one of our MTSS individuals did state, well, I get a little bit concerned because if you're having quite a few teachers, then that's a lot that they're coaching, but I'm also like at the elementary level, you're having staffs of between 14 and 25, whereas I'm dealing with a high school and I have 1 instructional coach, 80 teachers, and 15 of them are new. That's a much bigger burden on that particular coach. So anyway, that's why we did the 0.1. So for every 10 teachers that are within those first 3 years, they would get an additional FTE. So that's what gets that number. Then we took free lunch and we separated out free and reduced lunch. So free lunch, this gives the percentage at that particular school, and then the way that I can just tell you this is completely arbitrary. So there is no method to this madness, and this number could be changed. But what we did is I took the total number of students, multiplied it by that free lunch percentage, and divided it by 220. I felt like for every 220 students that are on free lunch, there should probably be an additional FTE that's awarded to that. I was also trying to look at the size of the school and look at, like, you know, if I look at a school like Timpanogos, for example, where I have 627 students, I have 53% that are on free and reduced lunch. I wanted that number to be over 1. So I was trying to kind of look at that as a marker there. So these numbers are gonna vary, not based on the percentage, it's also based on the size of the school, right? So the smaller the school, then sometimes those numbers are smaller. We did the same thing for reduced lunch, but on this particular formula, I divided it by 400 with the idea that perhaps a student that's on reduced lunch, there isn't quite the economic impact that's happening there. And so it's adding some FTE, but not as much a considerable amount. The next factor that MTSS felt like, and that I've actually heard so far on several of the listening tours that I've done, is that teachers don't know how to support and help our multilingual learners. They really want to, and they're at a loss in some cases as to what this looks like. So I'm hearing from them that there needs to be more support based on the numbers of students, and we divided this out. So you'll notice if they're scoring a 1 or a 2 on the WIDA, which includes students who would be newcomers to the country, their language development isn't quite there, versus 3s and 4s where they've been here for a couple of years, their language development is higher. So on that ML at the elementary level, what I did was I took the percentage of those ML students, multiplied it by the total student population, And then I divided it by 27.5. I really felt like at the elementary level, we needed to have, like that 27.5 number was probably a pretty good number. We needed some more help in the schools for our ML students. When we did MLs for levels 3s and 4s, I felt like they probably don't need quite as much support, so I just picked a number of 75 and divided it by that. What that then gives us is I added up then all of that additional what we call equity FTEs. So you can go through and scroll and see, like Westridge gets 2.8, Spring Creek would get 6 point, look at Timpanogos gets an extra 10.5 because they're so highly impacted. When I scroll all the way to the bottom, you notice that would require an additional 52 FTE just for elementary to fund that. I don't have 52 FTE. So what I did was I said, okay, let's see if we could maybe fund it at 2/3 that amount. So I took this number here, multiplied it by 0.67, and that reduced that number down. So now my amount is at about 31. Okay, so that's a little bit more manageable. And then what I did was I took that number in that column there, AE, added it to the enrollment FTE to get what the total FTE would be for that particular school. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. The FTE that was given, that's reported in this column, is just the FTE that was given based on enrollment alone. No class size reduction money, no extra pots of money that come in from the state. And then I calculated what that difference is, and so what you start to see is that sometimes your smaller schools look like they're losing. Like, Jason, to his credit, was like, wait a second, Amelia is a very highly impacted school, but then when we started to go in and look, remember this doesn't have special ed funding in it. And so I can't remember how many FTE were coming to Amelia, but it was a significant number. It's like 9 additional FTE are going to Amelia to support with that. So we'll start to take all of that into account. I just wanted to start with enrollment only and these numbers. So that kind of, and then this is the actual FTE that was granted, but this, I think this also included TSSA and land trust, if I remember right. Is that correct? Yeah. So we can start to look at those numbers. Devin and Steve have been awesome. They're going to start looking at our enrollment projections and start building this into a formula for us so we can really see what that's going to do. When we look at our class size reduction money, it generally means we would have a cushion of around 30 to 35 FTE that we would have to play with. And so we can look at that as being part of this process. We will not touch schools' TSSA and land trust. Obviously, that is left up to the school. Your school community councils determine how that money is spent. And so so we're not pulling back any of those budgets. We're just trying to create some consistency. So instead of giving schools a dollar amount and they're trying to hire really cheap people, we're just giving them an FTE number. This is how much FTE you have. And so we feel like that in the scheme of things, it'll work out. So that's the elementary. The middle school is extremely similar. There's just a couple of things that we changed. We don't have highly impacted middle schools. I changed the formula on the ML piece because they're pulled out for a class period. They're given a class period. It's basically almost a type of elective. So I didn't use the 27.5. I used 50 as the number for 1s and 2s because I did still feel like even in core classes, teachers are trying to help support students that don't have the language skills yet, and that's going through that entire child's day. So there needs to be some support there. And then with the 3s and 4s, I did it out of 100. We could make adjustments to that if we felt like we needed to. But if you look at this, notice the equity FTE would give Centennial an additional 4.7. Dixon is 5.7. Then we did a portion of that 0.67, so that 2/3 again pulls it down to that 6.972. And then we started looking at, what the difference is in terms of what they received versus what this equity model would give. we did put in these actuals here. What's interesting is, like, for example, Dixon Middle School, Devin brought up, they get quite a bit of youth in custody. Is that what the number was? FTE through that, and so that always gives them additional. So those things are still, we still have to work into all of these budgets, but those are things that have to be targeted towards specific pieces. When you look at the high school, this is what gets really interesting. So because of the numbers of students that we're dealing with, you'll notice that it starts to generate quite a bit of FTE here. And I did the same thing for MLs here, where I divided it by 50 for the 1s and 2s and by 100 for the 3s and 4s. But notice, like, Provo High School, based on this equity model, will get an additional 11 FTE, Timpview 8, Independence 3.79, and then I did it on this one, I did it by 0.35, and the reason I did it by 0.35 for the high school is because their TSSA and land trust budgets are so significantly larger than what you're seeing at the middle school. I mean they're twice what the middle school's budgets are. You're looking at $500,000 in some cases that these schools are generating through that, and so I felt like there needed to be a little bit more that the high school was expected. So we are directing more FTE down to the elementary schools to support that process. So anyway, those are the factors. Independence would be one where we had kind of talked about an MTSS that possibly when we do the FTE, we probably don't want to consider that at a point, you know, multiplying it down by 0.35. We would probably use the 0.67 just like we did with the elementary and middle schools, because I think we're dealing with some significant challenges and because of their smaller schools. So we can make those adjustments as we go through. What questions do you have, and then I can tell you what our next steps are.
I have an observation on the middle school.
Please.
And it comes particularly just from working with Dixon on their school community council. The majority of the money in their school community council is going towards those level 3 and 4s. And so the weight, I just want to make sure we're considering that in the weight we're giving to the 3 and 4s in the middle school, because in Dixon particularly, those are the actual kids that are needing a lot of support.
And we can adjust that number. So I appreciate that feedback, and I do think particularly at the middle school, like one of the things we even talked about was our elementary schools are actually doing okay, and then you see this dip in performance, student performance at both of our middle schools. There's like this dive that occurs, and then they start to come back up again as they move into the high school. So that concerns me. So that would be an argument for making sure we're providing that right support. And I do think I don't think that we have provided our teachers with the right resources. Like what do you do when I'm teaching Math 8 and it's a brand new student that's coming outside of the country and they speak Kinyarwanda? Like what do I do with that kid? Like I don't think we've ever talked to a teacher about what you do with that kid, like, effectively at this point.
Sorry, Rebecca, would that mean, so are we bringing that up because perhaps the district could fund some of those, and those funds could then be opened up for other uses of?
Right. I just want to make sure we're giving the proper weight to the proper.
She's trying to say, I think that if you, because this is weighing the 1s and 2s more than 3s and 4s, but when you hit secondary, actually your 3s and 4s on the WIDA
become the group
aren't
that need
quite
more
in this
support.
other more supported environment. They're in your regular classrooms trying to access academic language that's just taken a big jump.
And it's just evident by the way that John has and the community council has had to structure their community council money, is almost like 98-99% of the money from community council money is literally going towards targeting the level 3 and 4 students who and if you talk to John, you've probably heard his whole explanation of it before, but it's a really interesting explanation and it makes a ton of sense, because the 3 and 4s, when you reach that age, don't have a good foundation in either their home language or English, and so academic language in either one is not really been established. Where in elementary, when they're young enough, you can kind of catch them up there, but it's a lot harder to catch up a level 3 or 4 once they reach this age. Anyways, and so I just want to make sure that one is actually weighted a little heavier, and just because I know that that's where so many of their extra resources are going towards, right? And so it would make sense that we would want to weight that heavy in the middle school.
And I also think to speak to the high school as well, like when you're looking at, you know, you're trying to get students graduated, and what does that look like if they're coming in with significant language deficiencies, and how is that working? So the other component that somebody brought to my attention as well is that AVID also requires some FTE that's tied to it. So we're starting our meetings with all of our secondary schools to go through how to structure the AVID program, and we probably do need to have a component in here for each of our schools, and how much support they need with AVID, because right now they're absorbing the cost of that, and if we really are saying this is something we believe in, then we need to support the schools appropriately with that.
Yeah, I'm grateful for this. I have a couple of questions. My first one is, I mean, you're talking about if you have a program like AVID, what the needs would be to run that program. I think the same thing goes for our program of DLI, for example. To actually fund an entire program when you need to, at an elementary school level, give equitable opportunities for students to have more than one teacher, for example, in a grade level. Like, it is not the same if you only have one choice if you're in that English track. And what happens is families will transfer to a different English only school or into a different school setting and choice out, and I don't think that's optimal, nor do I think that's giving people the same opportunities as they would have at a different type of program in a different school setting. So that's just a consideration that comes to mind when I'm looking at this, like, are we being equitable to everyone regardless of, you know, just in terms of support. So that's one thing that came to mind. And the other thing is that goes into secondary ed when we're looking at our bridge program and some of these things. Like, this is an ask, this is a commitment as a district to run DLI. Are we supporting it with the right FTEs all the way through? Right?
So
and so do they understand that this additional FTE is to support your DLI program? Or because I have heard before, like, well, we aren't given additional funding. Not, this isn't this year, but in the past I've heard, you know, we have this program, but we don't have additional funding at a secondary level specifically for this program. So then I would just ask, is that in this consideration, or is it a separate conversation? It doesn't have to be related to this, but it just
I have a couple of comments with that. I think one of the things that we have to look at is, if we really are going to be committed to at a dual immersion school, thinking about you're going to have 2 classes for every grade level that are English only, you're going to be dropping those class sizes to like 10 or 11, and the amount that's going to cost in terms of FTE is pretty extraordinary. So if we're gonna, if you want that to be a priority of the board, realize that will probably eat up your entire FTE cushion, and there will be nothing left for all of these other indicators.
Okay.
I would also argue that when we look at I think we also have to take into account academic proficiency of students, and the academic proficiency of the students that are sitting in DLI is so much higher than it is, say, for example, of multilingual students. That's where I would argue the equity piece is coming in, that we're also looking at that proficiency piece. As far as secondary goes, I'm gonna cry bull crap to any secondary principal that's telling me that we're not supporting it, because here's the deal. I know how you build a board at a high school, and when you have got elective classes, it doesn't matter whether it's a DLI class or another elective class, you're gonna have enough students in it to carry that class. Now, I will say there are some exceptions to that. Like, if I'm carrying an AP Chinese class or a bridge class in Chinese and it has 11 students in it, you're right, then you're having to funnel that. But we have AP funds, we have concurrent funds, we have like the amount of pots of money. I don't know if our,
well, like I said, that's not a current thing.
So I would just say, I hope that the principals bring that up so that we can help them brainstorm how to fund that, because I just don't think it needs to come in this particular model. But that's just my opinion.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask if you would do. So there's clearly, we could probably put 100 different factors in here, right? We could add in so many. So can you explain just why these are the factors you chose over putting in DLI or over putting in whatever else we could have put in there?
So part of what one of the things that you look at when you look at a school that's an improvement that they look at very quickly is, obviously they're looking at proficiency rates of students Most of our schools we are in district improvement for basically 2 reasons. One is our multilingual students and our special education students.
Yeah, I didn't see
Special
that.
ed has significant funding that's coming at a different level. We talked about adding even more funding as a result of special ed, but we actually felt like that the multilingual learners are the ones that are not being supported significantly by title monies. Special ed is we get quite a bit. So that's the reasoning there, because when we start looking at those opportunity gaps on our school report cards, it's our multilingual students that we have the opportunity gap. It's our free and reduced lunch students where we have the biggest gap in terms of the whole student population versus those individual student groups. So that was really what drove that. And then we had a situation where most of our research is also showing, like I'll give you a great example. One of the reasons why Spring Creek, in my opinion, is a high performing school, and Jared, pipe in here, is because they actually have a more seasoned staff than some of our other Title I schools do. So what you start to see is once those teachers hit 4 or 5 years and they've been there, you get this culture of stability. They can be grade level leads, and you're not constantly trying to retrain individuals into what that looks like. And so if we're really going to target that instruction, we have to make sure that we're addressing and providing the support if we have a school that has a significantly inexperienced population. Some of the other things we looked at office discipline referrals. We thought about doing that. Part of that problem is that there's not consistency right now as to how those are reported. So sometimes people put in an office referral because the kid forgets a pencil. That goes in, and I'm like, this is not a thing that should be written down, right? So and I don't want to create a motivation to actually get kids more in trouble so that more FTE flows that way. So it'd be something where we need to create more consistency in that piece of things. The other number we thought about was mobility rate. Like how much a student population is turning over. One of the problems with doing that is actually some of our schools that have higher mobility rates that you would be surprised about are actually some of our wealthier schools, because you have kids that are going to a charter school and then they decide they don't like the charter school, so they move in, and mobility is determined by if you're enrolled in 2 schools in a given year. And I just feel like it's not giving us an accurate enough depiction. So we did talk about using students who are experiencing homelessness exclusively. If we needed to pare it down, we could go that route. I just don't ever feel like we have really accurate numbers on that. Like we're asking the questionnaire, but you're always having kids that are falling through the cracks on that, and you might be able to pick them up through free and reduced lunch indicators. So those are the reasons why we pick those particular things. And this could change. Like we could look at it and principals could come back and say, actually this is creating a greater challenge for us. We would really like you to look at this number, and we would do that.
So what do you see as the next step?
Great question. So next steps would be, we're gonna turn all of these awesome spreadsheets over to Devin and Steve. They're gonna start looking at what those what our actual amount is that we're working with, that additional FTE that we can award, and then make sure that that's getting awarded out appropriately. What are those budget pots, and what is our prediction about what that will look like? And then rolling it out to principals so that they can start to see what the process is. We have a lot of schools that use these budgets to hire a ton of part-time people, and I really would like our principals to start focusing on Tier 1 instruction. We've got to get really solid teachers in front of our students, and yes, I understand that sometimes you're trying to use those instructional assistants to create more support, especially through Tier 2, or maybe reduce your class sizes, but that's where I'm hoping they'll be really forthright with Jared about what that looks like and what kind of flexibility they need there. So.
Am I understanding right though that with this model overall we are giving them more FTE
Yes.
as a whole, so they would have more
money
available if
school.
they
Not
needed?
every
Yes,
school.
so not every school. So what's happening is the FTE pot is the same, Oh,
Which
our pot's gonna be
okay.
the same, what you're actually saying is,
Is
we wanna make this
changing.
very systematic so that it isn't just based on a principal calling this person and asking for this, or one of the problems that I see is we base a lot of our budgets based on the number of students that you have. And I think what we sometimes don't recognize is how much of an impact when we're dealing with a highly impacted school with a small population, they're not generating that amount of resources, yet they need it more extensively. So this model is meant to do that. So there are gonna be schools that are going to receive less as a result of that.
Can you go to like the high school
Yeah,
tab
sure.
for me? So, and go all the way to the end, okay, yeah. So where it says actual FTE, that's saying what they've used this year?
Yes, and that includes their land trust.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 97 for Timpview
Yep.
was actual, but we would give them 86-ish?
Yes.
So that means there's 11 that needs to come up out of their land
Yes.
trust?
And right now, what they
But right now
got
they only
that was
give
81, so we gave them so we're giving them an extra 4.909.
Okay.
You're getting
So,
Okay.
yeah.
As you were describing your formulas, you were talking about sort of your thinking behind how you came up with those numbers, and there's a certain amount of kind of you just thinking, well, what is it most likely, what would make this make an impact, right? I guess I'm just curious to know, have principals had a chance then to hear this presentation before now, or will they have a chance to hear that and to say, actually, these are the students that require more of our, in case that some of those numbers don't reflect their reality in their schools?
Yes, so that will be on Thursday. That
Okay.
will happen.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I think, you know, that their input would be really helpful to
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure we have this correct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, I think John's gonna speak up and say, hey, don't treat my 3s and 4s differently from my 1s and 2s. They're struggling just as much as anybody else. Or I would rather have less of an impact on my free and reduced lunch and or take out the reduced
Right.
lunch category and let's do that.
Yeah.
So I want to hear that feedback so that, you know, but what I want them to see is that we're trying to keep that number total right now. We're right now between 30 and 35 is what we can fund over that enrollment. There will be other pots that we can pull from, but we're really hoping to try to keep that pretty even. So am I saying that right, Devin? You can jump in and tell me I'm messed up at
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's the impact on the budget?
We still have to deal with it, but you know, as things move around and as we've got repurposed, we've gotta figure out what the net result is, and then we can
Right.
come up with a better idea of what our net amount that we need to come up with.
What's really possible.
Yeah. So these are just the first steps, and this is always gonna make people really nervous. So one of the things I showed Devin and Steve, I think that several districts have moved from is instead of moving from like a budget number, so you're trying to track all of these numbers, as we're trying to move towards, this is the FTE that's generated. So this is how many part-time secretaries you would get based on the number of students that you have. This is how many, this is the librarian amount, this is, and everything would generate based on a formula so that you know and you can start to identify who those people are in that, rather than trying to juggle and pull 10,000 from here and 5,000 from here and figure that out.
I'm
Melanie?
just gonna use Timpanogos as an example. Do we have building space?
That was a great question. So that would be another issue, is if we're adding those teachers, do they even have the room for it?
Okay.
So that will be another question
That was
we have to
one of my
yes,
questions
we're like,
on there.
I don't know. Can you find 10 extra spaces? I don't know. So, no, excellent.
Question. I was just at Centennial today for their community council, and they were talking about their increased enrollment mid-year. Like, is there any way, how do we capture that in mid-year you have this increased enrollment? And this is probably a separate discussion than this formula.
So you don't.
Yeah.
Cause it's all awarded by October 1
Yeah,
count.
so it's just that, and then
So
they get through and.
So some of the things, and I don't, you know, I'm not sure how much we've really, I feel like people who build master schedules kind of know this, but there are classes, for example, that always will have attrition. Like if you're looking at a high school level, your AP classes sometimes will start really big and then they get smaller when they start figuring out the homework. Well, so if you're being smart in how you schedule things, I'm gonna be really honest, I would put 45 students in an AP US history class at the beginning of the year, and I would put 22 in my regular US history class and make sure it's scheduled exactly opposite. So as the kids, if they drop from AP US history, they go straight into US history, and I don't all of a sudden have an AP class of 10 and a regular US history classes across the board of, over 40. So I think part of that is you have to start knowing where those movements happen. That's almost impossible at the elementary level because all of a sudden like fifth graders move in and you're like, could you have picked like different grades here? Like why are you all in the same grade, And so then that's why we do hold back funds in our budget to go in and try to support either with an aide or whatever that is. We have that in our policy. Once they hit 30, then they get an instructional assistant. So other questions?
When do you plan to bring this back to us?
Oh, great question. Probably I would end of February because we're not gonna have it ready before then.
So probably the first meeting in March would be
yes,
okay.
yes. One of the things that we talked about is that we want to work through this model and then have Daryl and Jared take those numbers out and meet with the principals because there's gonna be some things that happen, right? Like a principal could be like, well, you allocated me this, but I really do need another 4th grade teacher here because I have to keep these 3 kids separate or they will kill each other, right? And so you wanna have those conversations so that then they can bring that back and we can figure out where that money comes from. It has to be a dialogue and a back and forth as to what that's going to look like or this isn't gonna roll.
All right. In the interest of time, no, you're good. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead for now. We're going to skip item E. We're gonna put it at the bottom of our agenda, and if we have some time, I'm gonna emphasize that we just need to kind of pick it up a little. If we have some time, we'll try and catch it in this meeting. If not, we can always move it to the business meeting. I do think it's important to go over the ideas that we found very valuable at USBA. But we're gonna go ahead and skip that now, and try and catch that a little bit later. And we're gonna go ahead and move on to item F, which is our large purchase requests with Deb and Davey.
So we have 3 purchases that are being requested. One is a combination of Sensitivue and Timpanogos for the monitors, the touch screen, to replace the outdated projectors in the classrooms. So these will replace both full schools. Then the next one is, and that's the wards. Then the next one is the box truck for the warehouse. Currently our box truck that we use to deliver all the food to the schools is 22 years old and it's a little bent. So it's not running as well. So that one will replace. That one will be coming out of the school food services budget. And then the last one is the Tempview asbestos removal. So that one actually ended up cheaper than what they had originally quoted us with the amount of asbestos, but those are the 3.
What a delightful surprise.
I know.
It's not very often that you come to us and say that it came out cheaper.
Yeah, it doesn't happen hardly at all. So it was nice to see that one come in a little bit cheaper than what we were expecting.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Devin on any of these 3 large purchase requests?
I did. When's the timeline for the asbestos and when are we getting rid of it?
So asbestos is done. They're starting to tear down the building on Friday.
Wow.
Okay.
They'll move in and
That's exciting.
so that'll be fun.
Yes, it will.
Any other
It'll be
will it be after school?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. They're only gonna do that after school.
We should probably double check.
You never know.
I was thinking, wait a second, what story did Wendy hear?
Yeah. I saw Devin's eyes like does she
No,
believe that?
it'll be
All
they're
day.
hoping to minimize, but they'll move it in Friday morning and start that on Friday morning. We're inevitably gonna get calls from neighbors about the dust.
And how long do we expect it to take? I mean, if it's just like over 2 days, we can deal with it for 2 days, right?
It's not a 2-day process.
Oh no.
Right, but it's how long?
I don't know that I've heard the actual estimate on the
I
amount of
think it's a
time.
couple weeks.
I think it's at least 2 weeks.
2 weeks, I
2
thought.
weeks.
Yeah,
Okay.
So
I
that's what
thought it was
I
I thought it
thought.
was at least
That was
Okay.
what was in
you
the
know.
back of my head, was that it was gonna take that 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
And are we
And
doing
that's the taking down and the removal, so.
Okay.
and whatever we can do to prioritize, obviously, I mean, one of this, but dust, like controlling that I know there are things you can do
You
to
can spray it.
spray it down and keep the
Yeah.
dust from being too
Maybe it'll snow every day they're doing
Yeah.
that.
Only in our dreams.
some toxic snow that will bring all that dust down on
Maybe
the
it'll rain.
ground.
Maybe it'll rain.
And
So
is this tech thing something that every school like this is standard?
It's just standard.
Yeah.
They're on
Okay.
a rotation
That's
schedule,
right.
and the ones that are getting the oldest are the ones that they're
Mhm.
replacing.
Great.
And this is part of their existing budget.
Thanks.
Is it a 7-year rotation schedule? 10-year?
I believe it's a 7-year.
7 year.
These screens are 7 years.
Okay. Which is ancient in technology
Correct.
world.
Yeah.
Like if we're keeping up, we're replacing them yearly, right? So I think that's perfectly fine. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, then let's go ahead and go with our preliminary fee discussion. Who, is that you again?
So, yes,
Okay.
and I think we don't have fee schedules for you, but one of the requirements that we have every year is to go through the fee waiver policy and procedure. So everybody's aware and that you can ask any questions about it, so we can make it really quick so we can recapture some time.
Okay.
So our policy just goes through and defines what a fee is, you know, and then it goes through and what qualifies for a waiver, which is pretty much everything that a school charges. The things that don't are yearbooks, school apparel that is voluntary, school lunch, and any fines. So
Can you tell me the policy numbers? Do you happen to know that?
6160 is the policy.
6160.
And then our procedure goes with it. The policy is pretty simple. It's just that we have the ability to charge fees, but we will do our best to not overcharge. We have a cap in there of the $5,000, and then also we have a activity cap that fits under the waiver. So they're allowed 4 activities for the waiver before parents will be required to pay, which the state has allowed. So most people aren't gonna do quite that many activities, but it's happened before. So it also goes through the requirements on the fee waivers. So every school has to have a fee waiver admin, which is one of the principals. We created a couple years ago an email that parents can submit their fee waiver applications to, and then the principals will go through and approve them and give it to an admin who keeps a list, and then the school's finance secretary will mark them and go in and waive their fees. So it just talks about the process. Every year you have to approve the fees, approve the maximum, and approve any new fees that are brought forth. It talks about the travel, the fees for those travel is included, which ties in really well with the student travel policy that is currently being looked at. Every year, school fees, and this is a difficulty that we all have. The school fees for the next school year have to be approved before April 1st, which no one knows what they're gonna be doing in January, the next school year, or how much it's gonna cost. So the fee sheet that is brought to you will be a maximum of what could be charged, not necessarily what will be charged. So keep that in mind as we're going through it.
However, it can be amended, right?
It can be amended, but the amendment process, which is also listed in here, is there has to be 2 public meetings that the public can actually come and comment.
It's not an easy thing to do.
It is not an easy thing, and it's something that we've been mostly resistant to, except for in the case of an opportunity for students to travel. That wasn't originally on the approved schedule. So what we'll do in the approved schedule this year is add travel to all the activities, so that if they do end up traveling, then that is already approved and it doesn't have to go back to the board. But one of the things that Daryl and I asked of the ADs is, once the board approves the fee schedule and they have a better idea of what the actual cost is gonna be, assuming it's lower, there can only be lower, they can't go higher, they'll put on the website, on the spend plan, what the fee will actually be. So so that parents are aware. The fee sheet that you will approve is gonna be just the maximum that can be for each program, which is what is required by law. And then just that all fee waivers are required, nothing can be charged in elementary school for during the day items. They have a specific wording of things that need to be on a document for all the elementary school teachers that they can ask for donations, but it cannot be required, and they actually cannot track who has paid and who has not. So that is the basics of the policy, and the procedure just goes through. We have a fee waiver deadline at the end of October, and it has to be per year, so we don't have someone who all of a sudden qualifies a senior year and wants you to waive the entire 4 years of school. They do send parents to collections every year now, so that we don't have that problem of carrying over balances every year. And so at the end of the year, a parent who was involved in football may have $6,000 that and then they bring in a waiver. So, but the waiver's only good for that current year. But schools do have principals do have the ability to waive fees for students who are having outstanding. Okay, outstanding might not be the right word, but an outstanding item.
Extenuating
circumstance.
Also, I think that answers my question was if the dad or whoever the provider is loses the job in November, they can no longer qualify for a fee?
So any of those kinds of extenuating, they can apply at any time.
Okay.
But the deadline is that end of October, so we have a good idea of what we need to be able to provide the schools for those waivers, and have a good idea. The teachers have a good idea of what they've got. So.
Do we see a lot of extenuating circumstances usually?
We don't see a lot, but there are some. You know, there are some who's exactly as Gina says, the father loses the job, they lose their income in the middle of the year. There are things that you can do at any time. You know, it's.
Yeah. So I will say that I think I live in an area where there's a lot of this, and I've had quite a few questions. I've been surprised. Most people in my area anyway don't even ask. So I don't know if it doesn't happen or they just don't even ask. And so I've had to say, I've heard about it, then I've had to go and say, let me ask, and then I tell them to come in. And so and I've had a few tell me that they asked the principal and the principal said no, like they can't apply. So maybe we need to have some training with administrators that they can still apply after October, because I've had at least one family this year who told me that they were told no.
So they should be allowed to at any time if it's a significant situation. We ask that we can put a deadline, and we do have the ability to say no, but I don't ever think it's a great idea to say no arbitrarily without understanding the situation. We need to also get better at the schools at advertising at the beginning of the year about the fee waiver process. And I will work with the secretaries, or at least get something put up in the schools during that registration week, so they are aware of where they need to go and what they need to bring in.
And I didn't get the impression that the school was trying to be vindictive. I think maybe they just didn't understand. Because I went straight to Wendy and asked the question.
Yep, we do quite a bit of training, but there is always interpretation that is done. So we'll make sure that gets done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions for Devin? All right, great. Then let's go ahead and move to item H for the potential Google purchase.
So this will come on February's board meeting. I just wanted you to be aware that we're securing bids to purchase the full suite of Google, and I don't know all of the details, but I tried to give you a handout that was tied to it that explained. It provides us with 10,000 site licenses. It provides us with the ability to put in more filters into our email system. It also expands the amount of storage that individuals have available to them. The way that we are going to be paying for it is out of IT's budget. They originally had set aside that money for internet filtering, which now the state covers. So they're just going to transfer that over. And if we go with a 3-year agreement, then it's less of a cost per license that we do. So they're just verifying right now, because the original invoices that they had received were from September and October. I told them I needed updated invoices, and they were going to check, because there's several companies that actually provide this, so that we can make sure
Does
that
it
we're.
come from Google?
No, it doesn't. I guess you buy it from like some education software distributor, something something. See, I just thought it was a Google thing. Nope. Gotta buy it from somebody. So just note that that will be coming, and I thought we could have all of that in place, but we didn't get everything.
So is 10,000 licenses, is that enough?
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
too many, right?
Mhm.
It's like
Way too many, cause how many total employees do we have?
So when cause we have the 2 domains itself, and so the .provo.edu, that it's 10,000 plus. So it's just once you are at 10,000, then it goes over to this particular amount. So we should have enough for everybody. So we have 13,000 students, and then we have what, 2,200. Thank you. See, she knows how many employees right off the top of her head. Amazing.
Okay. Any questions for Wendy about the potential Google purchase?
So this solves that problem we brought up in the DSC
Yes.
of the weird email forms.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, it does. So that was because we don't have that filtering capacity, then we can't post those emails. So this, according to what IT is telling me, is we would be able to do that because now they can put in greater security features in that process. So you don't have to be like, I wonder
So
who
this
I'm sending
happens
this.
my senior year.
Yes,
Perfect.
I know, you're welcome. You're welcome. We're being very helpful to you, Will.
Happens to every senior.
Yeah, something like that.
That's why you are where you are, so you can advocate for the ones coming after you.
All right, then let's go ahead and move on to the ParentSquare
So
information.
this is, I've been talking with the communications department about this. This has been something that's also been brought up by teachers as they've gone out on the listening tour. We are going to request that we do basically an RFP. We will write this up because there are several companies actually that provide this particular service. The one I'm the most familiar with is ParentSquare. What it allows us to do is it allows us to message parents and put forth communication literally into every single language. So the parent downloads an app, they choose which language they want, and then every time the communication comes out from the school, it translates it into that language, and when they respond back, it sends it back into English, whatever language I have selected as part of this. It allows a teacher to message a student, message a parent individually if needed, and then it's going to that parent. So like, hey, I missed so and so in class today, then it would go to that parent in that language, and they can message the teacher back. The thing that's very nice about that is it gives admin oversight to that, so that, for example, I as a principal could go in and see any of those messages, so that it gives some protection to a teacher that they're not giving out their cell phone number to message something. It's not going into email per se. Parents can then choose often whether they're receiving those messages as a digest at the end of the day. If you can push through emergency alerts, so it would allow us, when we're doing an emergency alert, it would go out to the language of any of our parents in that process. You can also set it up so that you can have a student side of this as well. So that, for example, if I'm the FBLA advisor and I want to create an FBLA group, I can do that and message those students, and I don't have to use like a remind or something else, that this would be the format. Now, I will say this, we have to look at each of these different platforms, because there are some things where it really has to speak to PowerSchool. Parent information has to be very well updated. And the other piece of this is, if you use ParentSquare, for example, you have to have someone that's creating those groups. So there would be some sort of an assignment that would have to come at that school level that would help to set those up. That can be quite extensive if you're starting to talk about different sports groups, and I just don't think we require coaches to do it at all, because what ends up happening is they have their own separate apps and things that they're doing. But in terms of curricular types of things, I think this could be a possibility. Caleb was telling me about one, is it School Messenger was one?
Yep.
And then Remind has one, so we would wanna do an RFP and kind of write up what we want it to do, and then determine what's gonna be the best option for us. But this is just one that several districts have adopted.
Do any of these allow teachers to translate their homework into that language?
It's a great question. You can load it into it and it will translate it, but like if I upload a PDF, it won't translate the PDF for them. So I would have to actually load it into a post or copy and paste it into a post, and then it would translate it through that post. So you can do it that way.
And how would this coordinate with the policy we're talking about around foreign language services and translation, where we're saying you need to be certified in a certain way to be dealing with educational topics, like
So this is purely just for
messaging.
messaging that's
Okay.
going out through phone, email, text messages. And so it does fulfill that requirement of federal law that states that that information needs to be delivered in a parent's home language. It is not enough. There are lots of people who think, well, as long as you're providing it in Spanish, that's enough. It actually is not.
Right.
We are in violation of federal law when we're not providing it in the language of the parent. That has been established that we have to do that. Those communications do need to be accessible to them. And right now we don't have a great way to do that. So that will be coming. So I just want it on your radar. Because that'll be a lot of money.
Any more
Do
questions
most
for
schools
Wendy?
use something like this? Most school districts?
I don't know about most. I would say like I know Canyons uses ParentSquare, Murray uses ParentSquare.
What?
Everybody has some form of it, but not all of it's this extensive.
Yeah.
It's like Blackboard final site that we have now, we could do certain aspects of this, but not everything that Wendy was just
Yeah.
listing there.
I think Salt Lake District is using a different platform, but it's pretty extensive because they have so many languages. So it's just one of those things when if you're not providing this, it can lead to an OCR complaint. And so that's why being proactive in this way is super helpful. But we do need to recognize there's some, like I didn't recognize that when we rolled it out in a prior district, as just the logistics of rolling it out is it will probably be like a year and a half to roll it out if you're gonna do it effectively and not frustrate everybody and mess it up.
So this would replace potentially like my teachers using Remind
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Or Class Dojo or
Yeah.
Even when it's in English.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
you
'cause
would
you're
you
doing
would still use
Remind.
ParentSquare for it as well. Yep. Yep.
Just for maybe the legislative committee, this would be something good to show again that districts that have high multilingual that we could use extra funding
Yes,
to pay for things like
absolutely.
this.
What's really interesting is in my past experience, we were asking for school community council trainings and documents to be translated into multiple languages, and they said we don't have the resources to do that. That's on you to handle that and provide that training. I thought that is fascinating to me. So that's considered a general ed obligation of every district to provide that. So
Do we have I think I've been told this before, but I can't remember. How many languages do we have? Well, it's a lot, right?
like at least 38
Okay.
from last I checked.
Okay.
So
In the district, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So and they're not, it's not Spanish is obviously gonna be our most common one, but
Right.
so any other questions about that?
Okay. Well then guys, we did it. We have time. We have time to go over our USBA ideas. So what we're gonna do, the idea here is that every board member is allowed to take 2 minutes to let us know your favorite takeaway from USBA. So we can kind of put our minds together and see if there's something we think we wanna move forward with. And so
Does that include Will?
Yeah,
Sure,
sure.
you can back
Yeah.
up.
Absolutely. Will spent the time going to the classes, so
I
he
wanna
should
hear
give
it.
you
I wanna hear it.
Absolutely.
About it for
So
sure.
I would be happy to start, and then if you all want to grab out your notes and be ready for this, but
Can someone have a buzzer ready at 2 minutes, cause I'm gonna
I
need
know
one.
actually
Oh, totally. I'll be the buzzer.
Oh, Lisa wants to
Cause
be the
I need
buzzer.
it more than anyone, so actually I'll go last and for assignments.
No, that's okay. I'll try and go under 2 minutes. So my favorite class at USBA was a class on teacher leadership as a strategy to help retain teachers. And so the state has actually identified 6 areas that a teacher needs to be trained in to be identified as a teacher leader. And the whole way that and then so this school district put together a whole series of trainings. It felt very similar to maybe what we would experience with like our sites training with BYU. They put together a whole experience that lasted over like 2 years' time, where these teachers were trained specifically in these 6 areas, and then they became a teacher leader. And the whole idea behind this that I love so much is this has nothing to do with funneling teachers into leadership positions or into administrative positions. There are just some teachers who are just so great in the classroom and they wanna stay, but they choose not to because they don't feel like they're going anywhere or making any progress or doing anything new or different or fun. And so this is a way to train teachers, give them a little bit more responsibility at their schools, and buoy them up and inspire them, and then they are qualified to lead in certain areas, but also a lot of them have been inspired to stay. Some of the stats I heard is that teachers who were on the fence about staying actually chose to stay after going through this academy. And I loved it. We do so much to inspire people into administrative positions, but sometimes we just need to focus some attention on straight on our teachers who are good and want to stay in that position. I loved that idea and I thought it was definitely worth talking about. Okay. How long?
Nice, you have 30 seconds left.
Good
Good
job.
job.
Jennifer.
Well, I had couple to choose from, and so I kinda wanna hear from other people, and then I might just piggyback off of one of my favorites someone else has already said, so.
Okay. Pass.
Pass for now.
I talk a lot, you guys know. So one of the things when we had Shane Reese come and speak to us, and I would love to see this incorporated somehow in our strategic plan, but he said it must begin and end with students in mind. That was one of my favorite quotes that we've got in here.
That should be the
The mission
Students
statement.
with students in mind.
So anyway,
Need a new slogan.
Yeah, that's our
Someone write
slogan.
that down.
I'm writing it down.
So I would love to see that.
I'm telling Aurora about that.
I went to a class and it didn't really pertain to us. I thought it might would, but it was more for rural classes, but I ended up just staying in it. But one thing that they said is we're not a monopoly anymore and we're competing for every seat. And we're competing with charter schools, we're competing with the voucher bills, we're competing with all sorts of things and making our district a place where people wanna be here. So anyways, I'll stop with that.
Wow, 1 minute.
Good job, Melanie.
Timer's working.
I went to the strategic plan one that Tooele School District did, and the main thing I got out of it was how are we gonna implement our strategic plan after it's done? That's it.
Just a
You
any
did
good
that.
idea or any
That was just a
ideas?
question like, how are we gonna implement this?
Everyone is following directions so well. Thank you.
Oh,
Let's keep this going.
I have a couple other
Okay,
questions.
good.
Oh, okay, never mind. Just kidding. You're not done.
And then another class, I had a question and I don't remember which class it was, but how do you measure student motivation? 'Cause that's been a huge problem since COVID. And then I think this was the Logan School District that they were talking about using the Gallup Q12
Mhm.
to measure employee
Yeah.
satisfaction, and I thought that would be useful cuz it's only 12 questions, which is very useful.
Measures employee engagement.
I was just gonna say
Engagement,
engagement, not
sorry.
satisfaction,
The
yeah.
Gallup, what
Okay.
did you call it? The Gallup what?
Gallup
Q12.
Q12, I looked it up, it's so cool.
And they have a separate results for education.
Yeah.
And then I think it was in that same class, after they did their data days, they always go check the highest scores first. Because they wanna instead of doing the low scores, check the highest scores first. You wanna keep them high and you preserve the things you're doing well.
Yeah.
And those were my questions, my 4.
That's
That's it.
awesome. Yeah, that really stood out to me in the employee engagement class was so good. I thought there were so many takeaways, but one was I really loved when they said start with the things that are going well. Focus on those strengths and how to use those. I want to talk a little bit about Park City's class on kind of how to kind of the rising tide floats all boats. And they talked about student enrollment strategies to just help every student really be able to access the most rigorous learning opportunities. And there are a lot of different initiatives that they've done, but I loved their focus on the Dream Big program. I just thought that sounded like an amazing partnership that they've done. that specifically they partner with Utah State University and they focus on these first generation students, and they have a summer AP prep program, and kids commit to this, and they have tools and strategies to really be able to then get the most out of their learning. And a couple things I wrote down, they identified these four kind of the 4 B's: belief, barriers, belonging, and broadcasting. And I don't need to go into all of those right now, but just looking at the power of a multi-pronged approach to support our students was really inspiring to me. They talked about being able to look at students. They said kind of predictors for success were perseverance, motivation, and a growth mindset are critical for students to be able to succeed in more rigorous environments. And so how do we look at that and support those things in our students? And then the last thing I really liked was making sure every student had at least one person that they listed as a trusted adult, and they actually know that about all of their students, and they're looking for students who would be a great fit to say, hey, you could do this other class that would challenge you, and here's why we believe you would be a great fit for this class, and how to use kind of that belief and broadcasting out to help students know. So that's it. That's my time. I'm up. I loved it. I thought it was inspiring. Yeah.
All right,
Wait,
I
did we skip
Did
Will?
you just skip over me?
I skipped Will because he's not important. Just kidding. Sorry, Will.
You invited and then skipped.
Yeah.
Psych.
Will.
Wanna lick?
Wow.
Psych. Okay, Will, go.
Okay, I loved the Davis AI lecture, talking about the different aspects, so philosophy, professional practices, and stakeholder feedback, which I think is a really great model for us if we do want to go into AI. So creating a steering committee for what is our district philosophy, what policies are we going to use, and focusing, like, it's going to be a slow rollout, but we are going to need to have something in place. Especially with all the things they listed that we needed a philosophy on. So safety, privacy, ethical implementation, equitable access, empowering student learning experiences, just every aspect of what are we going to do with this, how are we going to do it. I also really liked the just the idea of working with student members across the state, because I mean, this seems to be the most that most student members have ever come to USBA. So I like the idea of student members working together more in the future. Especially, I feel like you should make it a requirement for the student members to go to USBA in the future, because it was a really great experience, especially just to talk to people. And Gina mentioned this when we were there, but people listen to us a lot more than they listen to other people, which was a really great experience to know that we do have a voice on this, especially on AI issues, because all 4 of us student members were unanimous. AI is coming. We should be able to use it in schools.
All right.
My turn.
Officially Gina.
All right. I went to the Davis one on AI with Will, and that's what I'm going to focus on. I went to a lot of the other ones; they were all fantastic. But one thing they said is we need to accept AI as a fixture in students' lives and embrace it. And I think that we're afraid, right? I'm in the generation that we're afraid of it. So I was really as we're going to these classes and I was thinking about it, my daughter texted me and said, I was asked to give a talk in church. Can I use AI? And my initial thing was no. And then I said, no, yes, you can. And we used it, and it was fantastic, using some of these principles that they gave us. She still learned. It was different than what I had to do, but I think we need to have a mindset there, right? One of the words they used was ageism with this kind of stuff. There's ageism here.
We're getting into those old people.
Yeah, I am. I'm already there. But one thing that they said is, like Will was saying, we need to do it intentionally, and we need to have guidelines and philosophy. And we need to do it slowly, offer a variety of solutions and support to make sure we're looking at student safety and privacy. So there are some challenges. One is lack of emotional intelligence with AI, so we have to look at that. We need to be looking at over-reliance on technology. We don't want to do that. There's privacy and security concerns we need to look at, and then ethical considerations are bias and discrimination, because basically it's AI gives us back, it's a mirror, right, for the bias and discrimination that we have in our society. Accountability and responsibility. What are the responsibilities of educators and developers in monitoring these ethical considerations? And then transparency and explainability. We need to, as adults, need to be able to explain these things. We can't just outsource that, right? And then emotional support. We need to combine AI with human interaction. And then the steering committee is one thing that I had on there. They also had a survey for teachers that they've offered for us to be able to use, like how comfortable they are. And I really like, they also have a sample AI statements for classroom for high AI, mid, and low AI engagement, and they don't dictate to teachers that they must embrace AI, but they show them, here are the ways that you could use it that could be beneficial. And I really think that if we do not teach our students, which means our teachers also have to learn, which means we also have to learn, right? If we do not jump on this, our students will not be prepared.
I just want you to know that they actually stole those
I was gonna say
documents from
Susie
Susie
did that.
Fox.
Yeah, we got those.
She was the one that
Yeah.
developed that, and they stole it from her at a conference.
I thought that when I heard them
So you're
present it, I was like,
welcome.
Susie did this at our
Like,
board meeting,
she
and
just
then the
presented
press
it, and then
wrote an
Now it's
article
presented.
about it. Yeah,
They should
yeah.
recite her.
Yep, that's okay. We're giving Susie fair credit though right now.
That's right.
Yeah, I got
She presented it here.
That's right.
No, you're good. And the USBA has a document that, I'm gonna give this assignment to Will, about what districts should be doing with AI, and I couldn't find it, so can you find it?
Okay.
Thank you, Will. I'm done.
Got an assignment on that. Okay, I'm talking about AI too. I went to Jordan school districts, and theirs was more focused on their pilot program they're doing in the classroom. Specifically, they're using school AI, which I think we actually, our innovative learning department has been using some school AI.
It's the
A
pilot
little
program.
bit, the pilot program. So, of course, my favorite thing when they were talking about presenting, they did say they used an electric bike analogy. They said, it's like an electric bike. I was
That's
like,
why
this
you
is
loved it.
great. When teachers use it, and students, but the burden is less and the effort is, but their effort is multiplied. So it was an English teacher who presented, and just talked about ways so it can help teachers and the students, right? And for teachers, it helped him level passages in his English class, create rubrics, create projects, write emails, lesson plan, which actually let him be better instructor. He had more time with his students because he could actually individualize his instruction for students. They talked about being ambidextrous with it, which I liked. They said you can, for some of your instruction, you improve your practices to make it AI proof, but then you also, in other ways, use AI as a tool, right? And then helping students. With this school AI specifically, what is great about it, it's all within they've address like the data and the privacy confidentiality issues. That's why you can use it in schools, and it's all under a monitoring system. So whatever kids are putting in, teachers that are using their classroom and parents can see what kids are putting into the AI. Anyway, I will say, let's see if there's anything else I have to say. The goals of AI, as they present, helps teachers increase time with students and gives students access to AI, which is really important because, right, if what Gina said, like, this is here, and if we aren't helping learn how to use it as a tool to improve learning, right, and to improve our achievement, then kids are going to, we could just really get behind, and we don't want to do that. Let's see. I loved it. Anyway, I left like almost in tears because it was inspiring.
So good.
So good. All right. Do you have anything you want?
Everybody said everything. I just appreciated the dance party. If you need a video of it, I'm sure there's one
Oh,
somewhere.
that's right.
Basically Provo School District.
Yes. Provo School District is the
We
fun
did represent.
district. Okay.
Yeah, we did great.
So my two favorite classes were the ones that Rebecca and Lisa talked about. That I think what stands out to me most is the one about the enrollment strategies for the rigorous courses. And I just loved that they gave students a questionnaire and asked them things like, what do you see as barriers to your learning? If you're not in rigorous courses, what is your reason? Like, and they learned that a lot of them don't feel that they're welcome there or don't see themselves there, which then made me think of one of the principles of AVID that we're working to really embrace in our district, is to help build that confidence in that belief that they can be there. And then they also are asked, who is an adult that you feel connected to in the school? And I think that can be really like an insightful piece of information that we could use. So I just love that idea of having that, and then that then relates to some of what Shane Reese shared in his keynote. He talked about that when a faculty member shows that they care about the student as a person, helps them get excited about learning, encourages them to pursue their dreams, then their engagement and their well-being doubles, is what Shane Reed said. So I just thought about how we can use a tool like what Park City is doing to get that information from the students to really think about that staff engagement as well as faculty engagement and create that culture where people can thrive because they feel that they can, they have that support, an adult that they trust, and we know what their barriers are so then we can address them.
All right. That was great. Thank you, everybody. I think that was a lot of really great highlights. It feels like maybe our top idea collectively or top point of emphasis maybe resides with AI right now. I feel like I heard the most about AI, and so maybe that's
How
something.
many of us went to an AI?
I went to one as well. And so I think maybe that's something.
I think I was the only one who didn't.
Didn't. That's
I
Cuz
didn't.
I was like,
I didn't.
we have Susie.
So I wonder if maybe that's something we can give a directive to maybe start looking into like policies and procedures and maybe start digging deeper into AI and see where we wanna go with it. Is everybody okay with giving that directive to Wendy and saying let's start giving it a new focus to AI and maybe try and progress with that?
I think
Because
we
you
need
have not very many things going on, so you
Well,
can add
I
something else, right?
I don't know. Megan and I just heard a whole presentation today at the PCSD where Jason and Tina from the department came and I learned a lot. I mean, I know we've had Susie come, but I learned more about what they're doing and what they want to do to support our teachers.
Mhm.
I didn't attend these AI classes, so maybe Meg can speak to it more, but I feel like maybe we already are doing a lot of
Yeah,
things already
I
that
think
Okay,
that
good.
it's there, we just have to, I think what
It's
needs
the
to happen,
rollout.
we need to figure out then, right, how to integrate so it's not just its own little thing. It really has to
Systematize
be
it
integrated
and
in our, and I do think kind of what Gina mentioned with the Davis presentation, it does have to be intentional and SLOTUS in the sense there is, I think, a training piece, right? You can't say, okay, all you teachers now have to use AI.
Right.
Or this school AA program, right? Like in the presentation I went to, it was very much they started with a pilot program and had a few teachers doing it, and it has spread based on when those teachers really learned it and saw what it could do in their classroom, then they had other teachers asking about it, and so then they would help. And so but it isn't something that's like in its own silo or isolated outside of what's happening in the classrooms. But I do think we have things happening
Pilot
here,
programs
we
going.
just need to figure out how to
Yeah.
either or support that or
it,
get
and
more
I think
teachers that maybe are interested.
and put a system in place so there's consistency around the whole school district so it's not this is happening here and it's something completely different over here. But I also think we can tackle that with by giving everyone a framework through policy, right? That's our job as a board, right? So if we could even start working on that, then that is a way to help give teachers in schools a framework on where to go with it, right?
So
Gina?
I think it's gonna be important then that we include maybe not AI specifically, but innovation or whatever we wanna call it into our strategic plan. Because everything we do is gonna hopefully go back to our strategic plan, so it needs to be, we need to have this addressed in our strategic plan or it's not gonna happen.
Jennifer, did you have one last comment?
yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, maybe I don't even like calling it directive, but maybe just asking cabinet to discuss this and go where are we at with this, what ideas do we have to really see where we're at and where we need to go and how we can get there.
Right, I think we could ask Jason and Tina, right?
Yeah.
What the work they've done doing, we probably are
So is
aware.
that clearly unclear to you?
Yeah.
Exactly what we want you to do?
Well,
Okay.
it's been almost a year, right,
Mhm.
since we first got an update on, I feel like Provo was leading out in this area and so just to hear for us it may already all be happening and we
Mhm.
haven't heard as much, right? So
Right.
it would be great to just hear about what is happening and how we can support it and if we need policy framework around that.
And there's gonna be some, I spoke with Jason and he's gonna be putting together, so I was gonna ask Wendy if it's okay if I sit in on some of the discussions that are being had about what are the results of the pilot study. I didn't know if that was appropriate for a board member to sit in, but I would love to hear some experience from teachers and see kinda where they're at with that, if that's appropriate. I can talk to you later, Wendy.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much everybody. Is there a motion to adjourn this study session?
I move that we adjourn the study session.
Okay, we're adjourned. We'll just take a quick 5 minutes and we'll try and head over to the Uh,
So we are going with that.
we are gonna, we are going to after all. Sorry about that. We are gonna go ahead and go into the PD's, are we, which one are we in? In the PC, no, we're not. We're not
Staying
going.
here.
Talk to Chris if we are, because he has to change cameras on the YouTube thing and he has to stop it and start a new YouTube thing and then we
We are,
can
okay.
publish that.
No, that's okay. I thought we had decided we were going after all. There was
No.
some question and I apologize. There
Whatever
was some
you
question.
decided, we're gonna
What
do
did we
it.
decide? We're
Next time we
staying?
will.
No?
Next time we will.
Okay, this time we're staying.
We wanted consistency so that we're always doing study here, business there. We didn't make that clear and so we'll just stay here.
Okay, so for today we're staying. So then let's go ahead and take a quick break, 5, 7 minutes or whatnot, and then we'll come back.
Sorry for that. I gave you the floor and then took it away.
Thank you.
Just trying to find that thing she wanted me to find.
How are you?
I know.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We had another one right
'Cause I
beside
think
it.
I
Yeah,
also
I
looked at
realized that.
it
I was
at
like,
one
this is
point.
already obsolete.
Mm.
It's still so very meaningful.
Well,
I shared it with our team, so
oh, I'm glad, 'cause yeah, yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you, thank you.
Don't say anything. I'm not saying a word.
No, still on. Say a word.
I've checked. AI, so yeah, I think they're supposed to be integrated. Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's funny cuz we were talking about this like kind of steering committee rollout and I was thinking by the time you've done that, everything you've learned is obsolete. That's the trick. That's the balance here, right? Is you do have to be thoughtful and mind your ethics and make sure your privacy, all this is intact. And also come up with something that isn't irrelevant at the end of that, and that's gonna be just a challenge for all public education moving forward. But it is like to your point about the e-like, it's a perfect analogy, right? Like we
Burden is less,
absolutely
but
need to,
your effort is that.
we need to see that as a positive thing. We have to. Alright. I didn't bring my stuff yet.
Okay.
I wish I had.
So I have found the folder that I think it's in, except I can't get access to it.
I
Wait,
wonder if
so
I
it's you're talking it was in the QR code that they had at the one, right?
Okay.
I think. And I have found what it was, but I can't get into
It's not
it.
working?
Yeah.
Do we I wonder if I
Where's
kept the email
Pat?
address,
Where's
maybe I
Matt?
can email them and ask them.
Do we know
I
where?
just texted him.
I don't know.
I didn't wanna text him during the meeting cuz I think that's a no-no.
I know, I got in trouble, I mean not in trouble, but I realized I was trying to respond to some emergency things earlier. I was like, I need to put my phone down for
I think
these
that's like,
situations.
No.
sometimes in the middle of meetings, I have to make sure everything's going okay at home, but not, we can't communicate about stuff during
Right,
the
like with
class.
each other, right, right.
Mm.
Exactly what you do.
And I'm curious to know what the USBA thing says.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't find it. I didn't try that hard.
Stay?
Well,
Just this kind.
all I can find is this thing from the U, and then something else from the IT department for the state, but nothing from USBE itself.
Did I keep my stuff? Because I'm sure they gave us their email addresses. Maybe I
Yeah.
can just shoot them an email.
Well,
Wait,
actually, you
the
probably
email address from the AI?
from the
From
Davis
the
School
Davis
District.
I
one?
think I have it.
Because let's see.
Well, you probably posted it at some point, honestly. Like,
Okay.
Is it
took
this
lots
one?
of pictures.
Oh, yeah.
I can
Yes, yeah.
You can text
during
Okay,
board
yeah.
meetings. You can't text another
I'll
board.
find a way and
Oh,
I'll email
got
it
it.
to both of you guys.
That's the rule.
Okay.
It's really fun that some exempt from all those rules.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
good rules, good reasons, right?
Yeah.
It's all focused anyway.
Sometimes it's like, I have to. But,
Well, I'm currently parenting from here.
that's me, even though my husband's home.
Will, what's your email?
Oh,
to
it's
make
part
sure?
parenting, isn't it?
Is it the
Although
W
he's
at
not,
Widener
he's
zero?
not, he hasn't texted me all.
Yeah.
But sometimes I get texts. I've had a lot of ideas on that.
Yeah, I know. We're like whispering into everyone's ears
We're like,
just now, thinking of what
Okay,
we
see if
all
that
wanna
was
do.
the one. I think that was the one I grabbed from the QR code.
his name was like Logan Toon or something like that?
Well, if it's
Yeah,
Davis, I
Logan
know.
Toon is our assistant superintendent.
Okay.
I know the president of their board.
Are we all here?
Yeah, I'm just
Oh,
waiting.
yeah.
Tonight, sorry.
When are you not in meetings, Joey?
I like it. So nice
Yeah,
to
it's
have
not
everything
working.
that's
I know.
coordinated.
It looks like it's broken.
I'll look
Yeah.
through my notes and see if I can find it. Or see if I
I
kept
think
that
maybe the
handout.
link just doesn't work
But I
anymore.
also feel busy, so I'm like, man, you must need this.
Yeah, 'cause there's no way I would have copied all of that down. Just one second.
Okay, is everybody ready? Thanks a lot. Alright, we have everyone here and are we recording and are we online, okay?
It never shut off.
It never shut off. Okay,
We didn't
great.
pause it.
Okay, well then,
Stop it twice and start it again.
Rookie
Yeah.
mistake. All right.
I'm not very
Stop
helpful.
it twice.
So the
Okay,
first
ready?
stop
Just stop
twice.
stop
And
twice.
push record again when you're ready.
And then, are we ready?
All right. Okay, welcome back everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. It is 6:39 p.m. We are convened today as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We're meeting at 280 West 940 North in Provo, Utah. We're going to begin tonight's business meeting with a roll call. My name is Rebecca Nielsen. I'm board president.
Jennifer Partridge, vice president.
Melanie Hall, board member.
Terry McCabe, board member.
Lisa Boyce, board member.
Bill Widener, student member.
Gina Hales, board member.
Meg Van Wagenen, board member.
Devin Daly, director of accounting.
Wendy Dow, superintendent.
Okay, thank you so much and welcome to everyone with us in person and online. We're grateful to have everyone here. Thank you for coming. I'll entertain a motion to convene our business meeting.
I move that we convene our business meeting.
Thank you so much. Motion made by board member Hales. Is there a second?
Second.
You started.
I'm gonna
Good
give this
job.
one to Melanie. Second by board member Hall. Great, thank you so much. So we are now officially in our business meeting. We're gonna start tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. And we've asked Anne Marie, I believe, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you for joining.
So join me in the, thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. All right. Okay, we are now giving time to the public for public input. And we have not given very much warning on this, so let me give the quick procedure. If anyone's interested in giving public input tonight, we have a form over here on my right that would need to be filled out and given to Bonnie, she's just sitting right by the form, our secretary. And then we would allow 3 minutes of input from anyone who wanted to give input to the board. So do we have any forms so far? And is there anyone who would like to fill out a form? Okay.
I do have a question. So was it posted that this meeting would be in the PDC or
And it was
was
just
not.
posted at our address. So
Okay.
it only ever posts at our
Cause
app.
I just wonder if someone would like went to the PDC for public input.
Just go check.
And then
Thanks,
we never
Emery.
go
Thanks,
went
Emery.
over.
Thank you, Emery. Well, if we need to come back to
Mhm.
this section, I don't mind
Good
coming back
question.
if we've got someone
Yep.
over there, but just in the interest of time and seeing that there are no forms filled out at the moment, we'll go ahead and move on to our business items, and then we can come back if we need to. So we'll start today with our first business item, which is consideration to approve a large purchase request, and we're starting with the asbestos removal. And Devin, if you wouldn't mind giving us a quick summary on that.
So this is the payment for our company who's been doing the asbestos removal. It came in about 80,000 less than what we were expecting, so that was great. And they're done and ready to start demolition here.
And this is for Timpview High School, right?
This is for Timpview High School.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the large purchase request for asbestos abatement in the amount of $123,195 as discussed in study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Hales. Any further comments or discussion started by Board Member Partridge, if there's any? Nope. Okay, then we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Motion passes unanimously. Business item B, this is consideration for approval for a large purchase request regarding the nutrition box truck.
So this is a request to purchase a box truck for deliveries for the schools. The current truck is 22 years old, not running very well, and the frame's a little bent. So they're using their fund balance in the child nutrition, so this is funded completely by internment.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the large purchase request for a box truck for nutrition in the amount of $103,599 as discussed in study session.
Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Boyce. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Hall. Any further comments or discussion, starting with Board Member Boyce, if there's any?
No.
All right.
I'm impressed they got 22 years out of
Yeah,
the
that's
truck,
pretty
so
impressive.
good job to the maintenance
Way to
team.
stretch that.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and vote then. All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Great, that motion passes unanimously. Business item C, consideration to approve a large purchase request, and this is for the tech purchase. And Devin, if you would give us a summary there as well.
So this is for two schools, Sunset View and Timpanogos, to replace the outdated projectors with the touch screens that are going in to a lot of the new schools. This is the regular rotation. So you'll see these come across every year. We combined the two schools because it was under one bid.
Mm.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the large purchase request from the Technology Department for Sunset View and Timpanogos equipment and installation in the amount of $158,940 as discussed in study session.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Motion made by Board Member Hales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Boyce. Any further discussion, started by Board Member Hales, if there's any? Okay, great. Then we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed with nay? Right, that motion passes unanimously as well. All right, and we didn't have anyone needing to give public input in the PDC, so I think that brings us to the end of our meeting. So is there a motion to adjourn our business meeting?
I move that we adjourn the business meeting.
Thank you so much. We're adjourned.
Woohoo.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. I might go out to Salt Lake and take it to my kid's ultimate frisbee game.
You did it.
I know. It's his only in-state game. He plays for the
Large
team.
purchase request,
They play the U tonight.
made the motion, I seconded.
Gina's the third.
Second one was Lisa.
Second one, Lisa made the motion, do you know who seconded?
Who seconded it?
Was it Melanie? Melanie?
Melanie seconded the second one.
Melanie, okay. It was Lisa and Melanie. Okay. All right.
Max said he's
Excited.
celebrating his brother's birthday.
Not bad. Not bad.
Do we have a with the policy for student members?